Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs. Hey everybody, it's Todd. I want to welcome you to part 2 of Marshall 101, where we're going to continue our deep discussion about the history of Marshall, at least as we can gather it. Hopefully you enjoyed episode number 1, and you're back for the closeout here. And we have a lot more to talk about, so hang in there, and hope you enjoy the show.
70s, but non-master heads. Mm-hmm. So, I think
let's talk about that, because we shift over in this category from originally JTMs. And around, what was
67?
it? 67
is when Terry leaves. And
they become JMPs, which stands for Jim Marshall Products. And while...
Wait, is it? Can I break in real quick?
Yeah.
I noticed in the notes that in the 50-watt series, which we were talking about the Plexis, this is where we're seeing the EL34s introduced. Is that
Yep.
that's correct?
They were at the same time. So... yeah, so it was late 66 is when they started. Sorry, I got to back up.
Because that's a pretty big change in sound between
66. Yeah. And I don't think it was like, oh, we're going for a different sound here. I think that was more like, okay, what's
available?
We're now cranking out some numbers here.
Right.
We need to make this a little more standard, so we don't have to keep shuffling for parts kind of.
Yeah,
so
the KT66s were hard to find and notoriously.
Were they a little more finicky?
They were very finicky.
Yeah.
and a bit of a fatter kind of a sound thing to it,
KT66 got a wider frequency response.
Yeah.
Where an EL34 is definitely more narrow, forward sounding.
Okay,
so,
good.
But
I
again,
just wanted to establish that.
I doubt if there was anybody in the engineer department going, what would sound better?
Yeah.
It was just a matter of Jim going, hey, I got to buy these by the dozens now.
But that's
a supplier thing, right?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's most of the decisions in the 60s were supply, not.
Yeah.
But that is one of the major factors on how we choose amps.
No,
do I want it to sound like a 6L6? Do I want it to sound like EL34?
No, you're absolutely right.
KT66?
And that goes to the classic sound. Like if what you're thinking of classic super lead or anything of that era is definitely EL34.
You heard it. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
And also, well, actually not until the 70s, mid-70s, that's when I guess master volume became kind of the standard on those models.
Yeah, that's a later thing.
And, that... I have mixed feelings about master volumes.
Before we get to that, can I touch on something that Chris was talking about?
Yeah.
About the different sounds and how through the 70s, what he's played on sounds more aggressive and raunchy sounding. I think part of that has to do with, number one, the circuit. They definitely, they separated the circuits more and more. So you had the 50-watt bass model, which was a 1986 model. Am I right on that? Versus the guitar lead version, which was 1987. The channels were EQ'd differently, but then even as you went later on, different transformers yet. Later ones were running on higher plate voltage, weren't they generally?
I think so. And did the bright cap value change? Did they?
No, they always used 470 picofarad bright caps on the super lead and super basses, so the value wouldn't have changed. But go back to supplying parts stuff. They weren't picky about, we have to use this brand of cap and this brand of this. So, and that's a big thing for me is, and you'll probably contest to this, you play through one 72 and be like, boy, that's a dog. And then you pick up the next 72 and it sounds like God.
Yeah.
They use different
that's
parts.
That's dog backwards.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah, it is interesting. Fender was way more consistent.
Way more consistent by this time.
I've had Marshalls where the circuit boards, there's 3 different types. There's the mustard caps, or these like chiclet type caps, which I think sound great. And there's another type of cap you can see on these.
Chiclet's a type of Mexican gum.
Yeah. So anyway, they use different parts a lot, and it's tough because the cosmetics changed a lot, and you still see JMP, but like there were flat lip head boxes up through like 68, 69. Then they changed to this more rounded, and then there's like the 50 watts were the small box up until 71. Then the 50 watts were the big box, same as the 100 watt without the vent.
And let me break in here. You may look and go, okay, this cosmetics in it, but it just so happens to have one of the transformers from 3 years ago because they found it on a shelf.
Right, yeah. So it is tricky.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the fun a little bit too, because once you know what a good one sounds like, you can have a lot of fun. And you'll see once you know what a good one sounds like, and there are pretty consistently good ones, you can find one that's been modded a lot, and that someone like Rob can put back into stock that maybe doesn't have as much value but can sound really, really good.
Yeah. So I just wanted to before.
Yeah.
So that's the whole evolution through the 70s.
Yes.
Is you have different components sourced slightly different. They've aged differently. Put all that together. So a 1959 model from 1975 is not going to sound like a 1959 from 68 necessarily.
And they were hand wired up through 73, and they started doing a printed circuit board, but it was a robust circuit board. It wasn't like small parts. I mean, they were the same parts, huge mustard caps, beautiful. My 74's got the circuit board, and it sounds killer. It's beautiful. I've sold plexis and kept that one. So, I mean, it's the circuit boards they used up through the, even like the early 80s were pretty good. I mean, you can attest.
Don't let the word circuit board sway you.
The hand wired is easy to work on, but those, the amps were still sweet, even though they had. But that's a defining factor as far as collectors.
Right.
Small box versus big box 50s, plexi versus metal panel, and then the hand wired up through 73, and then circuit board afterwards. Not necessarily a sound is a problem, but the collector issue.
And to that point, I don't think a lot of people even necessarily realize.
Sorry, I did not mean to do that.
I just hit Chris in the
hit
face
Chris
with the
in- yeah.
microphone. I'm
Nice.
That was rude.
I've been misbehaving on my mic technique, so he's been keeping me in line.
I just want
and-
everybody to hear you.
And he's like, man, I've been doing this the whole show. I think you're going to need a little contact here to remind you.
I'm so sorry. I did not
It's all
mean
good.
to bonk
It's
you
a
in the
very,
mouth.
very soft microphone.
Just wait until he uses the electric buzzer.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, please
Anyways,
continue.
Yeah,
Please
sorry to
continue.
go crazy on that. Last thing I would say is that those plexis are pretty. They roar like a lion, but they're very clean. I mean,
Clean.
they are. You got to work hard on them, and that's why you do need. Even the master volume heads, they are still pretty clean, pretty classic sounding, but there's more gain. You feel a little bit easier to play. The plexis, you do need to wrestle with them, and that's why I think a lot of the players were having them modded and up through the 80s, which we can
You're
start
right.
picking up. But like Eddie, he was reducing the voltage on them. He was trying to get hotter pickups, so they were trying to really hit the front end of these amps because they are super clean. And one of the reasons I sold some of my master volume heads, even though that I loved playing them, and actually I've been shopping for them lately. I love those amps. Was because it was harder to find the older heads in good shape, and you can always throw a boost in front of it, but you definitely need some overdrive. Even as gainy as they can get, they're still pretty clean.
Oh yeah.
Single notes, especially.
I want to touch on the. Now, I remember reading a story, and all the Eddie aficionados can even throw rock. I think we actually confirmed this with Chris Gill.
Yeah, you did.
So, yeah, the whole. Well, we'll get into the attenuation then. We'll hit that, save that, and save my Eddie story for that. Okay, go.
Save your story. So we're approaching the end of the 70s, and the deal, the distribution deal with Rose Morris is coming to an end. And Rose Morris is a distributor in the UK.
Got it.
Just in case you're wondering. They also have a giant music store there, too. But anyhow, I don't know if it was Jim or whoever at Marshall decided that they needed to come up with a new model that they were going to use with their own distribution, and that became what we call the JCM 800. Now, essentially, especially the early ones,
81 and 91.
81 through 91.
Well, that's the same thing.
81 and 91.
No, 81
2
to
years.
91.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We'll take that.
You
We'll
went-
accept that answer. So most of the JCM 800s were essentially, as we were talking about the model 1959, with very little changes. So these now the 800s all had circuit boards. Is that right?
Okay, well, actually, we got to back up a little bit.
Okay,
around
backing up.
around 76, they were still JMPs. They were still under Rose Morris distribution, yada yada. But they started making master volume models
Okay.
as early as 76.
Now, we've referenced Master Volume a few times. Why is the master volume important?
Okay, so up until this point, all the models had, well, not all the models. Let's say the 50 and 100 watt lead and bass models had 4 inputs, 2 channels. You had a brilliant channel and a normal channel, and both had high and low inputs, right? So basically a 2-channel amp, you could dial in the volumes. Those volumes were at the very beginning of the circuit. There was no master volume. There was no gain with a master. It was just a single volume for each channel. And basically when you turn those up to get preamp gain, the amp also rose to 190 decibels.
Right.
The master volumes allowed you had a gain control. You had, actually, they called it preamp, right? Mm-hmm. And then they had a master. And so you could turn up the preamp to get the preamp distortion, but then turn the master down to tame the amp into the output section.
So you get the drive.
You get the preamp
volume.
drive without the volume. And they started doing this in 76. They started introducing the amps. Now, as I understand it, at this time, because they had the different models, but they had a super lead and super bass, this kind of stuff. But even back then, people weren't like, I want the 1959 circuit, right?
Right.
They were like, I want a 50 watt Marshall, or I want a 100 watt Marshall, right? So they started introducing the master volume models, and a dealer would order 10 50 watt Marshalls, and they would get 3 of the 1987 circuits and 3 of the, they'd get just a mix match of different circuits at this point. And cosmetically, there was no difference looking at them. I mean, there'd be different number of inputs, but like they still same box, all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of a wild.
So that probably wreaks havoc in when it comes to like real collectability.
Well, real collectability, and a lot of people don't know. It's during the late 70s, 76 through really 80. I kind of refer to it as a Wild West time for Marshall, because they were using whatever parts they had around, whatever cabinets. You see a 76 with this type of cabinet. You see, what was it, 78, 79, they still had the fronts that came down on the side of the panels, but they were also started making ones that were the whole width. 79, they had rocker switches on them, right? On some of them, like maybe just the
So
US
this is a purist
something.
OCD nightmare.
Oh, it's a mess.
Yeah, it is. You spend hours on forums just trying to figure out.
Yeah, what year is this? Where did it come
That's
from?
not real. That doesn't exist. You're looking at it. I'm looking at it. It exists.
But what we start to see with those master volumes, that to Tony's, that's what becomes standard in the 800s.
Right.
So they kind of, and when the 800s start is when they start to actually, through the 800s, they still made the super leads, the 4 input ones, but they made very, very, very few of them.
Is it fair to say too that is sort of the birth of like modern distortion sound?
Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah,
because
I'd say so.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, pre-person.
Now you can, at low volume, these people still claim that you'd like to turn them up still to get some of that power section.
Absolutely.
But I think they sound really great, even at low volume. I think they sound really, really great.
Whereas those earlier 4 input ones, I didn't understand until I started having more of these things come through, and I had some availability to spend time with them. First time I plugged into one, I was like, damn, this is just a clean twin.
Yeah.
And then, you got to do an attenuator. Oh, you got to put a treble booster in front. Oh, you got to do this and this and this.
Yeah.
I have a great 101 question for you. As far as the early JMPs, the early 70s, the 4 inputs. Now, I've seen people, and somebody told me, said, hey, take a short cable and put it into...
It's the jump.
Yeah, the jump. Jump it over. What is the significance of that?
So
why do people do it?
So sometimes just the amps, the way they're built, you don't see like Angus or Malcolm doing that. But they just plug into channel 1 and you're good. But some amps had a little bit less low end maybe. So what people would do is they'd go into channel 1, it's the brighter one, go out of the bottom of channel 1, the low sensitivity input, into channel 2. And that way you could dial in. Channel 2 on a 4 input Marshall's darker, it's thicker sounding, whereas the first input's brighter. So you plug into that, and then you just blend in a little bit of that channel 2, that darker sound, and it fills out the bottom and adds just a little bit more.
Was there someone back in the day that was the first one to do that, kind of turn people onto that, or?
I don't know. I think
I'm wondering if there was somebody like
only-
Roth or somebody that originally,
Yeah, I don't remember seeing anybody having their channels jumped. The big one that I
where
can
that
think
came
of as
from.
far as the inputs was Hendrix Jim Marshall set it up, and like just the Fender amps, if you go into channel 1, you can come out of the other channel or the bottom into another one to chain another Marshall. So Hendrix he'd be plugged into one amp, then he'd have this long daisy chain over to his next amp, then he'd have another cable hanging down,
Right.
and he would chain all his Marshalls together. But I don't think I even saw him chaining or doing the jumper. And you
wonder
don't
where that
have to
came
do
from.
that. But some amps do sound better. You might want to if you're
Well,
not getting as much low
And the
end
nice
out
thing
of it.
about doing that is it does create more. It's not preamp gain, but it creates more gain because you're hitting the phase inverter harder. So if you have both channels going, even though it perceptively it's like the amp's not any louder, it's crushing that phase inverter a little more. So it does
Interesting,
push it
okay.
a little
Okay.
more breakup. But I wonder where that came from though.
Somebody's not getting credit for that.
Yeah. Now there's somebody famous.
It was
one of the
me.
listeners right now is going, "You morons!" It's
I did it
so-and-so."
first.
There's a quick little tidbit that I picked up recently.
There's nothing available on the first page. I put in who was the first musician to jump the channels on a Marshall. Nothing.
That's
Yeah,
Because
interesting.
you have too many words.
Well, some listener out there knows.
Yeah, and they
he
can-
should get a hold of Todd and educate us all.
Yes.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
Some of these old Marshalls, guys like Page, they were able to get a little more gain out of their amps because they'd be plugged into an Echoplex, which has a preamp. That's why you have like the EP boost
Right.
you were talking about earlier.
Right.
So there's these little things. They just had these signal chains that just provided a little more gain to some of these amps that were pretty clean. Really, I mean, he has a lot of crunch coming out of his amp. It's a
I
great
think
tone.
Gilmore was doing that first, getting the gain out of the Echoplex.
He might have had an Echoplex. It's got a preamp in it, so it drives the input a little harder. And Angus Young had a
wireless.
Schaefer Vega wireless.
Yep.
So he had input coming, or there's like an output control in that
Yeah.
Schaefer Vega to make up for signal loss, which
And
could
they'd even-
drive the amp a little harder too.
And they'd
So-
even use it in the studio just for that,
yeah.
right?
He's like, man, I had a great sound at the gig last night. And he's like, well, what's different? He's like, well, I had my radio on last night. Well, grab your radio.
Right.
So anyway, just to get a little bit more before this JCM 800 in the master volumes, sometimes they had signal chains that just provided a little bit more for the amps, which is cool.
How about that? Okay, great question, Jared. I had that one on my list too. Thank you for hitting that.
Yes.
Okay.
Back to you, Tony.
All right, so the JCM 800. So it is essentially a carryover from the later master volume circuit board 1959's.
And at the same time, I think you had mentioned before we started the podcast that they were ramping up. This all had to do with the JCM 800 came out when the Rosemorse
Exactly.
exclusive distribution deal came to an end.
That's correct. Now, Todd, where did the JCM 800 moniker come from?
From Jim Marshall's license plate.
That is correct. Can
I
you
actually
believe
knew
it?
that.
Honest to God.
Yes.
Well, sort of.
Well,
I don't know which came first because it's Jim's initials.
no. It's Jim's initials,
Right.
but it was the license plate that he had on his car.
The 800. So he had a license plate number 800 before?
Yes.
We're looking at a picture to verify that.
No, I think that's where the 800 came from. Was they decided to use 800 for the 80s,
Well, that would make sense.
and I think the license
but that's
plate came
probably
after.
what he had. No, I think the license plate.
Todd, you're a researcher. You got to find out for us which
There's
came
a
first.
book right there that says
license
Marshall.
plate?
I
It's
have
from
or the-
Marshall.
or the name.
I have from multiple sources.
I'm going with the book that says Marshall.
I will bet you. What's something that we can bet on that's not super expensive but meaningful here?
Oh, I know.
rest of that
An amp recap.
Oh no, that's
Yeah,
expensive.
A PV Deuce.
No. Oh, that's okay. I'll scrounge one of those up cheap enough. But well, let's see. I'm almost positive.
I mean,
that
I've
the
read in
800
at least two of these books.
Yeah.
Well, no, the other one's on the Blues Breaker, but yeah, that's where the
Okay.
the name came from.
Okay,
That was on his car.
Okay.
So when they did the master volume models, they still had the 1959 model, but they called the 100-watt master a 2203.
Bless you, Jared.
So they split off to 2203 and 1959 models. So the
Okay.
1959 was still through the JMP era,
Still be made.
non-master.
Right.
And they had the model.
2203, 2204 was the master volume.
Right.
Gotcha.
It's a
And
little,
then when
little bit
they
of
s-
math for you, but it's,
Yeah, and when they released the 800, this is kind of why I interrupted. When they released the 800, it wasn't like everything before this, where it was like a slow morphing into different things. When they released the 800s, they came out immediately like, okay, the 2204, 2203 is going to be our flagship. The next two sold or pushed units were the first channel switching amps they ever made.
Right.
The 2205, the 2210. And as far as I know, they still made a 1959 and 1987 model.
I think so.
Which are the 4-input, quote, plexi circuits.
Right.
But I don't think they made any super bass
No, I don't think so
going into
either.
800s. Yeah.
And
So-
the numbers that you're slinging around, the 2204
I
and
know.
everything,
They're just
that's-
model numbers.
That's
It's just-
literally just the model number.
It
But
has
we
nothing to do with the year.
But we call it, we reference the names, not necessarily the model numbers. So
Sure,
if
but
you're
you see the
trying
name-
to follow along and it doesn't make sense, that's
But
why.
you do see the names a lot. Like you'll see on Reverb, some 2203. So you kind of, you're going to kind of need to know that if you start investigating this.
That's totally fair.
Yep.
It's-
You're
But
gonna-
if you
it's
don't know
rough.
it through our conversation, that's why.
right, of course, it's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not easy.
It's a rough thing, yeah.
Breaking news, everybody. It says in Wikipedia that the JCM 800 did come from the license plate.
Yeah.
You owe me a PV deuce.
It's at my
I haven't
house.
given up on this yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so when the 800 came out, it was a very clear, like, okay, here's the models we're going to make.
Yeah.
2203, 2204, 50 and 100 watt master volumes.
Right.
2205, 2210, 50 and 100 watt dual channels.
Channel switching.
And we're still going to make the 87 and 59, which is the old 50 watt 4-input non-master volumes, but we're going to make them in very limited numbers. I
Yeah.
think they phased them out by 80.
Yeah, I think by 81 they were done.
Wait, no, they still made. That's when they are some
okay.
out there that are badged JCM 800, which would be 81.
Okay.
and still be those.
So to clarify that,
To clarify even more.
okay, I feel like remember Garrett from Saturday Night Live? He was in the early one when he was the translate the sign language. He was supposed to do the sign language, and he just yelled it louder. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Go
That's
ahead, Todd.
honestly one of the best. Okay, so if you are at a point in your life where you're like, I want a JCM 800 because you like any number of the bands that are, okay.
Chris, what would be the quintessential
Well,
one?
hang on. My point is from basically what you guys were just talking about. Be knowledgeable. The JCM 800, there's 4 models of that JCM 800. 6 models of the thing that you might think is a JCM 800. So you have to do a little bit more looking
But,
into
and this
that.
is where I was going to say, Chris, but just like most people say plexi, and the model they're looking for is the 100 watt 1959 model.
Yeah.
That's what most people think is a plexi. When people say JCM 800, what's probably the most?
I think the 2203 is the 100 watt. That's the one Marshall reissued in the 2000s or 2010s.
Right.
The 2203 100 watt. It's got vertical inputs. They did make one later that this is a collector's thing that are horizontal inputs. I don't know if the circuit changed at all, but
Circuit didn't change.
so but the
Same thing with the PV Deuce.
Yeah, JCM 800, 2203, 100 watt. If you want to get the 50 watt, I think that's killer. 50
Right.
watts amazing, but they didn't reissue a 50 watt version. They reissued the 2203, and they actually just reissued in their 20 watt series, just JCM 800 Studio Classic.
20.
It's a 20
Right.
watt, and it sounds really good.
Yeah.
Not about those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to your point that if someone's like, I'm going to get a JCM 800, what most people would say is the JCM 800 is a 2203 100 watt, 2204 50 watt.
Right.
Same amp, 50 or 100 watt. That's the
Right.
classic
Right.
kind of.
And as I was mentioning on the Origin 50, when you tilt it to the right, according to the thing, it's more of the 800 sound.
Marketing BS.
Hey, it might be, but
I could tell you
there's
what
a
that
difference
I could
between
tell you,
those two things.
I can tell you what that tilt knob does.
Oh, don't! You're ruining it.
It will ruin it for you.
Don't
Just-
destroy.
Okay, go back
It
to it.
will
Don't
ruin
destroy
for
it.
you.
Tonight I'm going to play the 800.
Okay, so now we're on the 800s, Tony.
So the 800s. I mean, what more do you want to say about the 800s? That is the classic Marshall sound of the 1980s.
As we know it.
You
As-
probably
as
do
we know it.
need a Boss SD1.
DS1.
No, SD1's the yellow one. Like
That's a super drug.
No, you need an MZ.
you need some.
That wasn't out yet, Tony.
You probably will need I don't know what Zach Wild used, but it's gainy, it's brighter, but it's you still if you want more gain, you're going to
Yeah,
use some type
to
of
push
it.
boost in front
Yeah,
of it.
push it.
Right.
You know,
Tube screamer is probably most common.
you could
with
use a
that.
tube screamer.
My
sure.
go-to when I'm testing those is an Archer, which is a Klon kind of thing. You know, it's not as bright as a tube screamer.
Right.
It's not as much of a treble boost. You know.
And then Slash used the 2210, which was the channel switching 100 watt. After the 2203, later in the 80s, they did this channel switching. He used that at that Ritz show that used like a kind of a famous guns show, and the sound in that show it just sounds like Appetite for Destruction. So I think those amps can be cool for a collector, or if someone that wants a JCM 800. If you don't want, it might have a little more gain. Maybe.
Well, it's a pretty noticeable different circuit. It's got. Let me think about this real quick. Where the EQ is in the circuit is different. It technically has an extra gain stage that doesn't actually add gain. It's where they put the EQ. So the circuit itself will sound and respond different and not be as classic of design. So it's like every 10 years when they would come out with a new design, when they went from the non-master master volume to now the channel switching, they would also change the circuit a little bit and it'd slowly evolve. So there is an extra gain stage, but where the tone circuit moves does something, but then there's diode clipping in the channel switching 800s that adds more gain. That's probably the biggest cause of more gain.
Okay,
is that they add in some diodes.
And that's
for diode
later
clipping.
in the years.
No, that's actually in 81.
That's earlier in the
In
years.
channel switching.
They came out with the very first channel switching ones were released right in 81 too. I can guarantee it because I've had them.
Interesting.
But 83 is when they really started to kind of take off. They changed the circuit. The very first channel switching Marshalls had a horrible switching system in it that the channels would actually bleed into each other. So you'd be on the dirty channel and you'd turn the knobs on the clean channel and it would change the sound, and vice versa.
What year is that to avoid?
81 through mid 82.
Okay.
And there's a fix for it
Buyer
because
beware.
they do sound different as well. But yeah, the channel, the switching.
Older
was,
isn't better.
they hadn't. It was the first, and this is important. This is the first channel switching amp they ever made. They didn't know what they didn't know. You know,
Right.
they put them out and then they went, "Oh crap! What do you mean that over time?"
They
you
should
start
have
to
known that
bleed?"
beforehand.
Yeah, but yeah. So 83 is when they really started to kind of this is
So in the realm of the 800, in your opinion, Chris, as a Marshall aficionado, what is the magic? Is there a magic year?
Probably just the early 80s 2203s, the standard JCM 800. That's what I'd say. Early 80s. Non-channel switching is probably the go-to.
Non-channel switching.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's probably the one you go with.
Everybody put this on your Christmas list.
And then you need an overdrive to get yourself into a little bit more of a crunchy territory.
And I'll say this too: I don't, with the 800s from 81 all the way through whatever, so 89 or 90 when they quit making them, I don't remember, like, there will be a difference from one to another, but it's not a drastic difference like it was up to that point where they're all a little different, right? I mean,
yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, it makes sense. So you
more
could,
consistent.
he's saying, and it might make sense. I remember I always just looked for the earlier ones, the early 80s ones. But maybe there's like an 87 JCM 800 2203, which is the non-channel switching. That's great. So, you just got to, the problem with these Marshalls is they're just not around. I used to have to go down to Cincinnati, Mike's Music, to just find, that's where I found a couple. I sourced some from the East Coast, the West Coast. You just don't go somewhere to listen. So that's why you're on the forums all the time trying to figure out, like, what's the questions you have. What's the sound? What's it brighter? Is it darker?
Right.
And then it's everyone's subjective opinion about.
Because it's a lot of money to sync on something.
I know.
At this point.
So you kind of have to get close to. Of course, you look at what kind of music do I like? What Marshalls were they playing? Let's start there.
Yeah. That's a good.
Yeah.
and probably something that you've experienced too. And I know Chris, we've definitely experienced this. You get one, you're like, oh man, I love this one, and then a tech gets inside and goes, well, the bright cap's been removed and this has been done, or vice versa. I hate this one. Tech gets into it, goes, wow, man, there's like 6 things in here that aren't supposed to be in here.
Yeah.
So you don't know from
maybe
the
a
outside.
word of advice is, if you are buying I guess an 81 would be a vintage amp at this point. If you're buying any of these early amps of really any kind, make sure you make very good friends with an amp tech.
Absolutely. I would take my amp straight over to Rob's. I'd probably play it, see how it sounds, see what the problems are, then I would take it over to Rob's.
What you don't like about it now, and go, don't change this, whatever you do.
So Tony, we got a lot more to cover.
Let's roll.
We got
So let's
to burn. Go.
Okay, so in the middle of the JCM 800 era, 1987 rolls around, and that is the 25th anniversary of Marshall. And they made a special run of amps that had silver Tolex and chrome control panels. Now, these were, I think, Rob, you've added some interesting notes here on that series.
Yeah, the Silver Jubilee.
Yes, the Silver Jubilee series.
These are rather coveted, as I understand.
Yeah, and they've got a sound.
Is there a scarcity to
It's
it?
a different
Yeah,
sound.
I mean, it was a limited run.
Okay.
Yeah, and Marshall in their 20-watt series, there's 4 amps. They reissued that, so that's one of their. They consider that one of their.
Flagships.
Yeah.
And at what point? I mean, really, this amp might have become popular anyways, but couldn't we say it's mostly because of Slash? I mean,
Probably his name's been coming up a lot, but yeah, he used the. I didn't like his sound as much with the Silver Jubilee. I kind of preferred the 800 or the Plexi sound. It was just a little too more compressed. It was a little bit less, maybe snarl, and maybe took a little bit of the personality out. To me, I think he probably loved it. But
was he using this amp in '87 when it came out, or did he pick it up later? Do you know? Or
I think he recorded Appetite with the Marshall on loan. Then he used the 2210, and then at some point, I don't know whether that was on loan or not. But then
so it's probably once they became pretty popular, they needed a backline of 20 of them.
Yeah, and then
they
he-
went to Marshall and he said, "Well, here's the new anniversary."
I know that
thing.
when he was playing with Michael Jackson, and there was like a Michael Jackson performance he was playing on. I can't remember where I saw that, but I saw that he was playing Jubilees.
Yeah.
So I don't know when he started.
So
or when
probably once they became like a major touring act, he needed numbers.
I bet he used
weren't
that
buying up
on
old ones,
Use Your
you know.
Illusion record, maybe. But
Yeah.
I'd have to check. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, so just like everything else, they had a 50 watt and 100 watt version, and each had their own numbers, 2550 or 2555.
And these are JCM 800s.
I don't know if they had
I
the
mean,
800
underneath
label on them.
the
I don't think they
Tolex.
did.
They did not.
Oh, no. It
Okay.
was a different amp.
I don't see any notes on this.
It was a little deviation. It was closer to the channel switching circuit.
Okay.
In that it had the tone stack in a different place. And I think with Silver Jubilee too, it had asymmetrical diode clipping, which gives you even more gain, and it's a different raunchy kind of sound.
Gotcha.
And I don't have one in front of me, but there was also something weird where there's something weird before the phase inverter where it ran the signal in parallel with something, and these were channel switching, but they weren't channel switching. They had a rhythm channel and a lead channel, I think, but they had one EQ, so it wasn't.
yeah.
It was a thing of its own. It's almost like, okay, we haven't come out with a new design for 5
a
years,
thing.
so here we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
It's a
and
unique thing.
writing on the tales of the great Mr. Man.
Absolutely.
So I mean, that's what I know about that. amp.
Okay.
The 90s are calling, aren't they?
Here we go.
We're just rolling through the decades.
Here comes
This
the
is
drum.
when it starts picking up, though.
Yeah. 1990 rolls around. The JCM 900 is introduced, and it's another series.
Oddly, from his new license plate.
Yes, he got a
he
new
just
license
happened to
plate.
get a new license plate
It was-
after 10 years.
It was on his wife's
That
car.
said JCM 900. He went, you know what we should name the next series?
We're gonna have a serious bet about this.
Oh, I know. I'm gonna
Big
get a
old
hold of
steak
Ken
dinner.
Brand and ask him.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
hey,
Narb. I'm gonna call Mr. Narb.
Mr. Narb.
Just got to date the car. That should help.
So anyhow, the JCM 900 series. I'm gonna let you go over
90
this
to
stuff.
98.
Yes, 90
Yeah,
to
1998. Yeah, so and when I say, like I just said, they had 2 models for the Silver Jubilee. No, they didn't have just 2 models because they had the 2552 that was a 112 combo. So through all of these, they have different model numbers
Yes.
for the combos, right? But they had the 2500, 2100, which was a 50 and 100 watt model. It was definitely a more refined dual channel amp, meaning that each channel had a more distinctive sound. It was a more clear. We're trying to do a clean channel here, and yet a higher gain channel on the 900. I think they were called dual reverb, weren't they?
They had a version that was called a dual reverb. Yes.
Well, I think that's that. All the 2-channel ones, I think, were dual reverb. I think that they said it in little print underneath there. JCM 900 dual reverb. So I think these were all like that.
That's ringing a bell. But
Yeah.
I'm not.
On
I
the
think so.
900s, it looks like the gain was 10 louder than usual. The gain goes to 20,
Yes.
I guess so.
so it's 10 louder than 10.
Yeah, it's funny. Didn't it start on 10 and went to 20?
I think so. Well,
Yeah, it did. It did start on 10.
And actually, weren't some of these? Did they have 2 gain knobs, and one went from 0 to 10, and one went from 10 to
that
20?
might be what
It
was.
might be. I mean, I don't know how much of it was in reaction
Nothing
to the,
but facts
to the
from
movie.
this show.
It was,
The movie
up,
Spinal
Todd.
Tap.
I think it was totally in reaction.
Instead of 1 more, you have 10 more.
It's 10 louder, isn't it?
But now something the 900 though is that as far as I'm aware, these are the first ones. Well, no, I can't say that because in the 80s they had an amp that was solid state preamp with tube power amp. So I guess this was the second thing they made that had a substantial amount of tube preamp circuitry, solid state preamp circuitry in it.
Okay.
Was the 900 series.
So that's the first introduction of a solid state.
Technically, it's not. They made something.
Oh, no.
Well, I don't know when this model came out. They made something called the Artist that was a complete solid state preamp with
Yeah.
a tube power amp. That was somewhere in either the early
Looks
90s or
like
late
we're
80s.
gonna
I don't know
have
where
to
that was at.
redact
It might
some
even
of
have
this.
been earlier. I think that Jim Marshall's least favorite model. Did you read that in that? I think it's in
Yeah.
that book.
Is,
Yeah.
is that what the Artist? Is that what they?
Yeah.
Really?
Is his least favorite.
I wonder what. Hey, researcher, why don't you find out what year the Artist came
think it
out?
was
I'm trying to
70s.
keep up, man. I'm
think
like
it-
I'm
well,
like these
70s.
other guys driving, going like, what the hell?
So if nothing else, the 900 was definitely the first like push it forward. It's got some significant
Massive gain.
solids and due to significant solid state parts in the preamp. So
Right.
it was like a preamp stage, 10 op amps, a preamp.
How
tube.
much of that do we think is in response to changing music?
Huh, interesting.
I think people
But
were
that's
just
also-
trying. It's just more and more gain.
We
right?
got more
They were-
gain, we got more
Were there
gain.
other amps? What other amps at the time would have been pushing that
Maybe
gain?
the boogies.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, they probably would have been chasing
they were
boogie
chasing
at
the
time.
boogies.
Yeah, and I think they were probably just people were using pedals to drive amps. They were probably just trying to make something
And the
more aggressive.
Randalls too. The Randalls were also like much higher.
Yeah. When did Soldano start? Remember, because Eddie started. I think I'm
escapes me
trying
at
to
this
think of like
moment.
who used the 900s. I heard. I think maybe Jane's Addiction was using those
Yep,
900s.
Yep. And he still does.
Yep. And
still his
then
amp.
I heard a rumor that maybe Kurt Cobain picked some up for a tour, but I don't think he used them necessarily on the records.
I don't know what
but
he
I don't
did,
know.
yeah.
I do know he used a DS1, maybe a twin. Maybe
Which one?
That's kind of he used a DS1 distortion.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. Maybe it was through a twin or something. But the Jane's Addiction guy is the guy. I really
Yeah, no,
know.
that is his sound, and that's still the amp he uses, the 22.
John 5, Rob Zombie, Lars Friedrichsen from Rancid.
So a lot of the guys in
Okay.
the 90s, that's what they...
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think what some of this goes back to is that the guys that were playing in the 90s, if, I'm a Marshall guy, and maybe I used 800s up till now. Well, now I'm in Jane's Addiction. I need 20 of them to go on the road with me.
Right.
What are you going to... You're going to go to Marshall. They're going to give them to you for free, and they're going to hand you 20 amps so you don't have to source these
Yeah,
old vintage
exactly.
ones. Yeah. So that ends up being it. Yeah, so high gain dual reverb. Yeah, right there's the panel.
And Rob, to answer your question, the Artist was introduced in 1986.
So yeah. So in late 80s, they were messing around with solid state preamps mixed with tube stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely the 900 was the first, like, okay, this is our mainstay amp. This is replacing what we did with the 800s. And it's a mix of tube and preamp throughout. And has reverb, which
Yeah.
before that, none of the models had reverb. None of the
Did the Artist?
The Artist did.
Okay, Artist,
But
yeah.
again, and maybe the Artist was kind of like a test put out, like a test balloon put out there, like, hey, will this work? Because I had
Right.
reverb and solid state stuff. in
Yeah.
there. But yeah, so they're changing with the times. They're putting reverb in there, even more gain, better channel switching.
Well, all right.
Yeah. What else about the 900 series, Tony? Is there anything?
That's not one of my favorite series.
Mine either.
I mean,
Okay.
Mine either.
that's just me. I mean, but I like classic Marshall stuff.
So Tony, what comes after the 900 series?
Well, I think we're approaching the new millennium, and that would be the 2000s. You know what would be a good name for?
And it just so happened Jim's new license plate came in 1997. He said, "You know what?
Let's call it the JCM 2000.
Didn't it also have dual super lead on it? It's ringing. I'm feeling like it says
There
dual
were-
super-
there
that was a
were-
model.
Okay.
That was
That
a
was a
version,
model of
yes.
the-
Oh,
the-
DSL.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
So they had the DSL 50 and the DSL 100, which was the dual super lead. And
Why is it called dual?
Because there's two channels.
Two channels.
Just checking.
Yep.
Still two channels.
Okay.
Yep.
One channel is a little more plexi-like, and the other channel was a little more just JCM 800, JCM 900.
So it had a tilt
Definitely,
knob.
it was actually just like everything else through here. They keep pushing the gain. The dirty channel, the DSL series, was dirtier than the 900.
Right.
It was, but the neat thing on the clean channel, it was clean and also had a crunch button,
Right.
which so you could get kind of the
Right.
classic, too.
JTM 45,
Now,
Baseman.
And then they had something else too.
well, if two channels aren't enough for
right.
you,
What did they do?
maybe you should get a TSL model, a triple super lead.
Yep.
And I think this whole series was really in
What
reaction.
would that be for? Who would? In what scenario
Cover
would you
band.
need that?
Cover band.
Really?
3, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You need clean. You need dirty-ish, classic-y.
Okay,
and
I
then you
see.
need
Yeah,
high
yeah,
gain.
yeah.
Absolutely.
3 separate. For whatever reason, I'm thinking that you're still merging all of the channels together, like in the
No,
jumps
it's
and
3.
everything. 3
you know,
separate.
This
No,
is
yeah,
a
you
reaction
just-
to
we're
you
channel
have to have
switching.
3
We're channel
separate amps.
switching. Got it. Got it. I'm tracking.
Yeah, so that's the TSL, yeah.
Hey
Now-
Tom, turn left right here. Turn left right here. Okay. I'm just in the car with our listeners.
Turn left, park it. So, from a repair standpoint, Rob, what would you tell me about the JCM 2000 series?
Unfortunately, the JCM 2000 series has had some catastrophic failure issues. If you get a JCM 2000 and this has not already been done, you are going to have to sink $600-ish, $700 into it to replace the main board and have it retubed.
Okay, I'm going on record saying after this goes, we're going to see a whole lot of these on Reverb. I'm just saying.
This
You already do.
just for kicks.
More.
Go to Google real quick here and type in Marshall JCM 2000 and then space bias drift
Bias drift.
and watch what comes up. Page after page after page.
There are 23,900 pages.
Yeah. That's how catastrophic this problem was.
What?
Done
Jared?
for free?
My DSL.
You got to speak in the microphone, buddy.
I thought we were not. So I have one of these, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and I remember early on, the store I bought the amp from. He's still open today, but he said, "Hey, there's something that they got to do to your Marshall and somebody. I don't think I paid for that to have that done. In fact, I think he gave me a new amp with the new
Okay.
equipment in it."
Okay.
So-
Do you still have that amp?
Yes, I do,
Okay.
because it just sounds good. I don't know.
Oh no, and I think they can be good sounding amps.
Yeah.
Sometime send me the serial number on it. I bet you still have a problem with it, because this was the bad side of it, is that they had the issue 1 through 5 board, which the whole board would become conductive. So the voltages would
Oh
jump
my
across
gosh.
each other. So the amps would burn out output tubes like mad.
You actually are the last one to work on it, though. And
Did I
it's-
replace that board?
I don't know, but
Okay.
it hasn't failed yet.
I'd have
It's
to
great.
look, but yeah. So the issue 1 through 5 boards had this problem. Then the replacement boards they came out with, they populated with the wrong components.
Oh,
So it's like, okay, to fix these 10,000 amps we have out on the market, here's the revised version, and they screwed that up.
Wow.
yeah.
It's to this
So
day.
stay away from these if you're
If you
maybe
want- if
even
you
new
want
to
one,
it.
If you want one, if it's already been done, here's the thing: once I replace the main board,
Yeah.
solved.
Solved.
You put in issue 20 board, you'll never have a problem with it again. I've never had one come back for an issue, but it's expensive. The board itself
Send your stuff to
costs us
Rob.
$250, $300 to replace this board, so it's major. But
And that's half of the price that a lot of these used ones are actually going for. They're
and
really
that's
low
why
priced.
they go in part. That's why
Yeah.
they go for so little, because it's such a wide problem.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a cool amp, and it's got a lot of really good sounds and everything in it. It's just they blow up.
If it works.
Is there a new model you can buy right now, a
There
DSL?
is. There is they reissued the DSL.
And there's no issue with
100s.
it?
No issues at all.
Okay, so you
No
can buy
issues
a
at all.
DSL from which
Yeah,
year?
get a new one.
Yes, and
Everybody.
I will say that's the exact same circuit. You look at the schematics, exactly the same. They sound noticeably different. It's probably
Of course.
the transformers
In a good way?
in a bad way.
Oh, unfortunate.
They sound much more bland.
Rob never has good news about any damn thing ever.
Well,
Ever.
but here's
He's
why.
the dream buster.
The new DSL 100s, I think they sell new for like $1,200 or something. I mean, it's cheap for a 100-watt all-tube head.
Yeah.
So,
Man,
they got to cut the cost somewhere, right?
it's a bummer.
Yeah. But
They are reissuing those other.
How do you ride the
Pseudo
bus with
20s,
that big
those are
scythe
cool.
of yours?
no, I'm just, you come to me for the truth, right? So here we go. Hey,
Yeah.
have you ever had a DSL or a TSL? Or did you ever?
I had
I'm
one
talking to Chris here.
at the beginning when they first came out, and I liked it. And then that's when I started realizing about the vintage stuff. Like,
Okay.
that's when I bought a Pro Reverb, a Fender Pro Reverb, like a '60s one, and I started getting really hooked. And
So
then
it wasn't necessarily anything bad about 2000. You just gravitated towards a.
right. And I played it at some shows. I liked it, but then I started getting crazy about the vintage stuff.
These
And-
fenders
and-
are making me want a
And
Marshall.
Tony,
That's exactly.
or I'm
right.
sorry, not Tony. Sorry, Jared. You still would prefer the DSL 100 if you had to take it to a gig.
Yeah,
said?
just because it's more useful. It has more switching. It doesn't. I don't have to turn it up so much to get the desired. And it's not more for me. It's for more of the covers or the type of music that I'm playing.
So you think it's a little more versatile for cover
It's a little
stuff?
more versatile for cover stuff. It's utility wise, it's just better to use. in
Do you
my
have a 50
opinion.
or 100? I'm just curious.
I've got 100.
You got 100. So
Duh.
Yeah.
Well, okay, of course. Sorry,
Yeah, I've
sorry.
actually shopped around for one of those recently because I do remember I liked it a lot. I do think they are cool for all the Marshalls they put out with the 900s and everything. So it's a bummer about this issue. It sounds like you got yours squared away, and that's great. You're in a good place. But if you get a new one or an older one and you're not sure if it's got the board issue,
Have someone take a picture
little
of
bit
the
of a bummer.
inside and tell them take a picture of the issue. If it says issue 20, you're golden.
all right, cool.
Anything before 20, walk away from it.
All right.
So
There you go. Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
All right.
Where are we at, Tony?
Well, I think we're into the modern era. We had talked a little bit about the DSL reissues, and there was also the JVM series, which broke out in 2007. What does the JVM stand for?
I don't know.
Maybe it's his other license
Is
plate.
it vintage modern?
I think you're right.
Is it vintage modern?
And I think it.
Ah,
I think
Jim Vintage Modern.
I don't know why they Jim.
I don't know what
Vintage Modern.
I don't know what the J stands for, but
Jim.
But I think you're. I think they at least they labeled them that or
Yeah.
called them that or. Yeah.
And based on what I'm seeing here, each channel has its own 3-position gain setting. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, as every Marshall, every 10 years, they kind of push the envelope again. So now you've got a JVM 205, which is a 2-channel, 50-watt. And you've got the JVM 410, which is a 4-channel, Todd, 100-watt. In addition to, every channel has a little push button on it that has 3 different gain levels.
Jiminy Christmas.
So here we go. So you can pre-program the JVM 410. It's got 4 channels. To each 4 channels, different gain levels. So you can have 2 cleans, 2 crunches, 1 real dirty, whatever mixture. But then also it's MIDI controllable. So you can basically have a 12-channel amp. Yeah, but this
Like
is
my back is getting sweaty over this right
Well,
now. Like this,
You know,
and
the only
not
thing
in a
that
good way.
The only thing that would be better is if they could put stacked knobs like a boogie.
there's no stack knobs.
The dual
There's-
gang pods.
Maybe that will be in
There-
the next
There's
series.
just but you look at it, and the control panel is twice as tall as it should be, and it's just
my.
knobs for days. It's
Jeez.
like, my head hurts. Has 2 master volumes on it. Has reverb for every channel. It's
It's like the diesel amps with
Yeah.
just like 1,000 knobs.
well,
on
and this is at the point that amps like Boogie are
Right.
coming out with a 3-channel
Yeah, oh
triple.
my gosh,
the
Boogie amps,
Diesel's
too.
out, and so they're competing with
compete.
that. But so that's where the JVM, what they are. And what else was coming out around the same time? And these are still being made, right, Tony?
I believe they are still being made.
Yeah. So that's still their flagship.
Yeah. So you got the JVMs, you got the DSLs. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Those Origins now.
Yeah, the Origins. I
yeah.
mean, there's headphones. If you need a set of Marshall headphones,
sure,
you can get
I'm
those.
glad you brought that up.
Let's talk about the Origin really quick. Now, before I was about to buy this Origin amp, which it's a 50 watt amp. They also make it in a 20 watt. But the 50 has basically. Do you want, if for, I guess, lack of better terms, do you want it like full power, medium power, or low power? It has those switches on it. It also has the tilt, so you can kind of like, you can make it a little bit more gnarly. Don't look at Rob. Or you can dial it to a more rounder, classic, like 70s tone.
Is there just like a cap on one end of the? Yeah, that's what I thought.
All it is that when you turn it down all one way, there's two caps. So it's an active mid boost, bass treble boost. So as you turn it one way, it pushes the mids, pulls down the treble. You push it the other way, and it increases the bass and pulls down the treble. So it's just a dual action tone knob. That's all it is.
It's a simulator.
Right, but it is doing the thing that we're talking about.
Not
Jeez.
really, but I could put it. The good part is for
Yes.
$3.50, I can put a tilt knob in every one of your amps. It's two caps and a pot.
Okay. Anyways, jeez, Grim
Sorry.
Reaper's back. No, so I will say that what this amp did for me was allow me to have a Marshall sound that I could have in variable gigging situations, because almost every single gig that I'm playing, they're saying, turn the amps down, turn the amps down, turn the amps down. But I can still get this sound out of it. And it'll, and I've got a 212, and it sounds, I love the sound of it.
Do you use it on the highest power always, or do you?
For gigs, yes. In my home, if I use it on high power, I'll start to feel it, and unless I'm using earplugs, and that's kind of defeating the purpose of having those variables. So then I'll drop it to like the 20, and it sounds great. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Now, I've gotten grief from people who own 800s, 900s, and 2000s. It's not real, Marshall. But to me, that's like that's the only Marshall that I can actually use. Unless I'm going to a much larger stage, and I've worried about that. Actually, when we played the A&R bar, I was like, "Am I going to have enough amp for this place?" And when we played with Starcrawler, but they mic'd the heck out of it, so it was like, well,
times are different.
Yeah.
You don't,
I would imagine 50, 212.
Yeah, that's more enough for stage volume,
And I'm not even goosing it, because I'm trying to do like a 50-50, like enough amp and then hit it with my pedals, because I'm not really using that amp for gain. I'm using it for power and a little bit of the gain, because I want the color in there, but not. I don't want to ride, because it actually has a boost on the gain. So like on the gain switch, if you pull it out, all of a sudden that's boosted, and you get way more power and you get way more gain. And you can just go with that, but I want a specific gain, not just that Marshall gain.
It does have a vintage look too, which I think is cool. The small logo, I think I like the vibe of it. Which to me, the aesthetics of Marshalls, for some reason, especially that vintage look, to me, I really, really like. So.
Yeah.
Well, and that along with what you brought up, which I forgot about, all
They're
those
$500.
Yeah, they're
That's cool.
inexpensive. I forgot about all those 20-watt versions they've come out with. But I think in past 6-7 years, Marshall's really figured out that people want the vintage circuits. They want the vintage looks too.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know if you're hip to this, Todd, or not, but they've come out with a line of 20-watt amps.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's a copy of the.
And they have the 20-watt
800
Origin. They've
and
got the 20-watt.
Oh no! I mean the.
I know they got the reissues, but this one also comes in.
And
there.
they just came out with the JTM45 that has the white, the original Marshall aesthetics. It's got the metal logo. It's pretty cool
Are they calling
looking.
it like the Studio Classic series? or
Studio
something?
Classic is the JCM 800. Studio Vintage.
20.
Studio Vintage is the Plexi.
Right.
And
then-
those are all 20s.
They're all
Yeah.
20s. They're all made in England.
And there's and then there's the Jubilee.
That's right.
And now they did the JTM 45. The issue is, like you guys were mentioning earlier, shipping them. The cost is more here than it is in England. So people are like $1,700 for one of those. It's pretty high.
For a
20
So,
watt.
and it's a lot of it has to
diet
do with because
Marshall.
it's here. So people are kind of balking a little bit at the price, but and a lot of pros are using them on their stage runs because they can get that sound and it's not as loud.
Yeah, exactly. At 20 watts, you can push the master section of it and get breakup, and you're not bleeding from the ears anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing is that I noticed between the high output and the medium output, which is the 20 watt is that it doesn't, the bottom end doesn't kick you in the chest quite as much, and that's kind of like if you're playing rock and roll, you don't want that.
Yeah.
But if you're on a big giant stage, you're not going to get that anyway. So who cares?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like you got something that's working for your chain, because a lot of it does have to do with what your signal chain is. And if you're looking for that a little bit more high headroom, 50 watts going to help you get that.
Yeah.
You're getting into a little bit of preamp or power section if you're getting a little bit of crunch out of it. So it seems like you got pretty much the one.
I'm basically hitting it with a souped up bluesbreaker style, bluesbreaker style pedal.
Yeah.
And into a very quiet Rat version from Blammo.
Okay, cool.
So.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's
so
okay.
that's a new amp. Is there what other?
Well,
amps
I
that
think
skip over?
we would be remiss to not mention some of the solid state Marshalls. Some are okay. I mean, in my book, Marshall should be a tube amp, but there's been a number out there, including I think we talked a little bit about the Artist.
That was obviously the first solid state preamp.
With preamp, but it had a tube power
It
section.
still had a tube power section. You're right.
And then there was the whole Valve State series.
Yep.
I mean, those were insanely popular because
Wildly popular.
they were affordable.
But
I think that they filled the need for maybe, somebody that just needed a smaller amp or something at home.
Well, and that was in the 90s, wasn't it? Or was it 2000?
no, that was the 90s.
Yeah, 90s.
It was in the 90s? So
Yeah.
that would have been the time that like Peavey was selling amp circles around everybody with all their
Yep.
solid state stuff for $400. So
Yeah, I had I think it was called the
8100?
8120. It was the 8120. I'm pretty sure it was 80. It was like a double. It was like
212?
212.
Okay, yeah, the 8100 was the head version
Yeah.
of the same
So
thing.
I had the combo of that, and but again, I didn't know how to use that amp because it also had a crap ton of stuff
Well,
on it. And I was like,
But that if you plug into one now, it had clean and it had dirty, and it didn't have much mojo in between. It was clean and dirty. It was
I
meant
did
for the
not like the sound of
15-year-old
it.
kid that was trying to sound like
I got it on a
Metallica,
trade.
Yeah.
But I sold it to Guitar Center for $750. So wow. Yeah.
There was
Okay.
a MOSFET series I think people talk about that seems to be pretty cool. I don't know how pro it is, but they even have like stacks. So you can get like a MOSFET. I'm not sure if that was 80s. It was called the Marshall MOSFET.
Oh no, you're right. That was 800.
Yeah.
That was 800 series.
And then in the 80s also they had these little combos. I have one. It's called a Lead 12.
Yep.
Rumor was that Billy Gibbons used it on some recordings, but
Those
these
were
amps
okay.
are solid state. They're not meant for a stage, but I mean they have a great aggressive,
about the
crunchy
Lead 12
sound.
series.
So sitting around the house, I mean, way more gain than my Plexis do for
Mm-hmm.
sure. It's definitely more into that 800, even more. But with a lot of those amps, you're using your volume knob to clean up. So it's like, and I think people get stuck in that clean channel because, like you were saying, if you got this clean channel and you're going to your dirty channel, you're just like one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think Kurt Cobain did that a lot. It was to a great effect where you have this clean sound and then you go into this crunch.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get used to using your volume knob on your guitar, a lot of amps do clean up well. So you got the crunchy sound, and then you roll your volume down, you got like kind of a cleaner sound.
Yeah.
You got all these levels of gain on your volume knob
Yeah.
rather than just bouncing from clean to.
Me as a repair guy, that is a generational thing.
It totally is.
Because the older players, they played in 70s and 80s, and that's just like you said, they rolled off the volume. That's how they got the clean sound and the dynamics. There's a whole different player that started in the mid 90s where their volume is just an on and off switch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it
I
blows my
almost
mind,
never
too.
use
Yeah.
but I also
Yeah.
don't play the music that requires that.
Right.
Well,
Yes.
but it's different, and once you play, and typically those guys are, and I'm not.
Jared's a knob roller, right? You're a volume knob.
I mean,
guy,
this
right?
is the Guitar
Yeah.
Knob podcast.
right,
Of course.
Yeah, but you know, I talked to some guys that are like, well, what do you mean roll off? It's like, yeah, you roll off, you play lighter, and you switch pickups, and you that opens up 100 different sounds out of one channel amp.
And if you're listening for the first time, you're like, "What are they talking about?" Try that with a fuzz or a
Oh,
fuzz
fuzz
face.
for
It's
sure.
like
That's a big deal.
holy mackerel.
That's like one of the big
colossal
It becomes
change.
like a boost rather than a fuzz. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marshall had a pedal called a Super Fuzz. And if you would like to buy an original one now today, it's going to be around $200 to $2,500.
Yeah.
If not more. Like those are really sought after because there weren't a
Really?
lot of them.
Yeah. Well, are they really good, or is it just a collectible item?
No, it's really good because it's kind of like a tone bender.
Yeah.
I think there was some era there where Vox and the Vox tone bender, the Solo Sound tone benders. So Marshall had that Super Fuzz. I think it was like a rebranded tone bender circuit, which is basically Zeppelin 1. That sound, the early like Yardbirds, Zeppelin, Jeff Beck, I think used one a little bit. The tone bender. Mick Ronson used a Mark I tone bender.
Yeah, you can expect this. Sorry, I'm sorry. There's one for $2,300 on.
Hey, all right.
on
Hey Todd,
Reverb.
can
I
I,
think it's
borrow
3 transistor.
$22.79.22? Oh,
Yeah.
plus the freight. Hold on.
Plus the freight. That's $30. That's $40.
I'll take care of the freight. Can I just
buy
borrow
it
the
and check it out for a few hours and then say something, and then
Yeah,
take
but
it
they're
back,
all
send it
like
back.
that. So they're.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
nuts.
a very, very expensive pedal. I've
Yeah.
never even heard of that pedal.
Yeah.
Wow. See, I love it.
And
I
there's all
learned
kinds of
something
I
new
just
tonight.
saw Tony
stuff.
Baloney's book.
So 10 minutes ago we interrupted Tony. He was telling us about like all the other oddball solid state amps that were made.
Yeah. But
Yeah. So
do we
Valve
care about that?
State
Hey,
and-
Valve
in the interest
States.
of time. In the interest of time.
Yes.
Okay.
Eh.
Right. But in the interest of time, I think it's worth saying because we're looking at a very long show
This
here.
is gonna be a twofer.
and anybody that's made, I don't know.
Cut it.
You think
Anyways.
so? Yeah, maybe.
I say cut it.
Okay. So, anyways, maybe you're listening to part 2. Maybe this is all one. I haven't figured it out yet. But what I think is worth talking about right now is now that they've we referenced that they did a couple of these reissues. Is there something that we collectively maybe think that they could offer that would be great, or that well, we'd really love to see Marshall do this?
I think they've reissued a lot of the stuff. They have the hand-wired 100-watt heads right now. They've done some of the combos. I don't know, maybe bringing back some of those combos, like the Blues Breaker style combos might be kind of fun. It seems
Those
like
aren't
they
currently in production. I know
I
they
don't
did
think so.
reissue them.
They had
some
like a
point.
There was a point when they
1974X.
did. Yeah.
That's the one.
I
that,
like the
is out right
74X.
now.
The 74X was cool.
That's a great low amp.
Like the Blues Breaker was lackluster. I don't know whether it was because of the cabinet dimensions or whether they just didn't get the circuit right.
If they reissued the JCM 800 in a 212, like
Yeah, but they never will because nobody wants a 212 right now.
Are-
They still do they still make the
and loads of
100-watt
people
head?
I think they might still make the 100-watt head, but I guess like pipe dream stuff for one or
for a gig that's still, dude. Everybody's using AC30s and stuff.
Have a head in a 212. It's the same amp except you can carry it.
But I'm just
without breaking your back.
The one thing-
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that would be a thing.
I think 212s for most companies, 212 combos are becoming a thing of the past because of weight and size.
They are heavy. Yes, that's a good point.
it is cool to
I
break them in
redact
two,
this.
but the open back from the combo is helpful sometimes on a
that's true.
stage
That's
because
true. That's a
you do
difference.
get a little bit
Yeah.
less low end, but your drummer. I think with the closed back, sometimes if you're on a certain stage, you're going to need a little bit more monitor. It's a little drummer's going to need some in the monitor. You might need a little bit because it's so directional. I mean, it's awesome.
and it
but
is a different sound.
Yeah,
it
for sure.
responds different.
Even mic'd up, you can hear
Yeah.
a little more low end on a closed back. But having that open back, it fills the stage a little bit more, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not as thick or as much low end. I'm not sure.
But if you got a good bass, then who cares?
Right. But
Yeah.
yeah, you might not need the low end.
Now back to what Todd was saying though. I mean, really, they've reissued or are issuing most. I mean, they're kind of on point with
Oh, yeah, all their
what
classic
people
ones.
are asking
Yeah,
for.
classic
Oh, you know
ones.
what? You could get the Studio Classic, the JCM 800 head, the 20 watt. Although that might not be enough for you because it's only 20 right now.
Yeah, probably not.
So that might be why you need that. But then they have a 212 cab that goes with that.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
but that's only 20 watts. Although If you're going 800, you're getting gain out of your 800 anyway. You're not getting clean headroom really. So you can do the 20-watt head. It's got a pretty thick low end. I didn't have it loud. There's one up at Guitar Center right now. So if you want to check it out, you can.
Oh, interesting. Well, cool. Tanya.
Well, that was a long and winding road,
Yeah.
but there's more.
Just a little bit.
Just
not
when you
done
thought, just when you thought it was safe to turn off your listening device.
Just a little bit.
Wanted to talk about some alternative brands that were made by Marshall that some people, probably by now, most people recognize as real Marshalls. But I think we should talk. Just throw a couple of names out there. Probably the most common ones would be Park. As well as CMI.
See, now, I think most people probably heard of Park. CMI? I don't.
Maybe
how
not
many
so
of us
much.
had heard of CMI.
I have not.
So even Chris hadn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Kitchen Dash Marshall.
Kitchen Marshall. We're hip to that.
And a lot of these were produced apparently in the distribution agreements that Jim Marshall signed. He could still make and distribute his own amps that were not called Marshall.
Apparently
It's a
so.
little bit like
'cause he
Music
did.
Man kind of thing going on here.
I don't know.
Music Man amps and the Fender amps and Park amps and the Marshall amps.
No, Music
The
Man.
Music Man was after
a different
Fender.
company. Yeah.
Well,
That-
After
that's-
Leo left Fender.
He started
but
a new
it's like-
company called Music Man.
Anyway, okay.
No, this was running it. So in 1966, Marshall signed a deal with Rose Morse to be the exclusive distributor of Marshall products.
Correct. Right.
And he had some relationships with some stores and some people that he started making amps that were sold direct from the Marshall factory to
Yep.
these other stores under alternative names.
Essentially the same amps that he was
Were
making.
being sold as a Marshall.
Yeah.
Would be labeled.
Park or
Or-
CMI or Kitchen Marshall.
Yep.
And then there was another, my favorite name
Narb.
for Narb is
Narb. That's my favorite too.
name.
Those are my
Now,
favorite too.
for those clever listeners, you might realize that Narb is brand spelled backwards, which, as we talked earlier on, Ken Brand, who was kind of the I guess the brainchild of much of the early Marshall line, and so apparently Jim did not like naming an amp after a breakfast cereal, so instead of
sense.
brand,
Narb.
it's Narb.
I heard somewhere too that the Narb wasn't like, I know Park went to a certain store, certain something, and the Kitchen Marshall went to, I think there was kitchen stores.
Yeah.
Weren't the Narbs like to use up oddball parts or something?
That could very well be, because I'm sure they had a stockpile
I
of
thought
things.
that was the lore behind that
Yeah.
in part, but
Yeah. And then there was also, I don't think I've ever seen these other than in books, Big M.
I had never heard of this until you mentioned it.
Yeah. So it's those were just some
Now,
alternative branded.
let's talk about just quickly the lore of Park, because Park, and if you see Park on anything, it's kind of expensive. Even they came out with the Park pedal that sounds like a Park amp, but is like
Right.
amp in a box kind of thing. But what is the thing about Park other than it's just like kind of cool because it's
Just
not
the
Marshall?
availability, right?
Yeah.
Because
I
let's
mean,
say
there
they
were
made-
much smaller runs than what.
Yeah, because they were only supplying 8 stores with Park versus 800 or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as I know, they were literally built same hand, same parts, just different.
Different name on the front.
Right.
There might have been a time, I'm just speculating, where Park, if you couldn't afford, although they might, Marshalls weren't that, the Plexis weren't that expensive, maybe in the 90s even. I don't know when they started to become more collectible, but maybe you could get a Park that was a Marshall for less.
Oh, you might
I
be
don't-
right.
I
Like
don't know
through
if that's
the
the
80s
case.
or 90s.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that's the
probably
case
were.
now.
Now I think it'd be upside down.
Yeah, maybe it's like that's a Marshall.
But you're
although-
probably right. Like the 70s through 80s, people like, who's Park?
Yeah.
What's this crap?
Yeah. Well,
Not realizing that it was.
Yeah.
I mean,
This-
seriously.
This one says, just a brief, it says, so Parks are typically warmer sounding than the equivalent Marshalls. Like a
Yeah.
60s Marshall bass model, the new the new part.
Well, they maybe had that twist knob on it.
Right. They had the tilt knob.
Tilt
added.
knob. Yeah, that's the. Yeah,
No.
most likely that was it.
Is this talking vintage or is there a reissue or something? Or?
I think this might be in response to the maybe did they do a reboot?
I think there's been reboots.
Yeah, so
somebody's
this
bought
is-
the name and
this was 2014.
So that's negligible. If we take what information we can gather that they were made side by side with Marshall, back in the day, if you pulled a Marshall off the line and a Park off the line, they should be the same amp. Just
right. And the reason I was pulling up the Music Man thing is because I mean I know that Leo wasn't they weren't Fenders and Leo wasn't at Fender at the time, but they were.
Are you sure of that?
No.
Well, it's almost like GNL. Like
That's
to
what I'm
your
saying.
point,
Is GNL
it's
and Music Man amps were basically like, well, it's still Fender, you know.
yeah. Well, but in both of those though, it was you pick up the very first GNL and it wasn't a Fender because Leo was always like, okay, what can I do now? And it was an advancement, so
Right.
it was not the same circuit.
Well, it had
for
the
better or worse.
ceramic pickups, which I kind of like.
And
I
the
mean,
bridges.
Not that I like it better. I do like the output of a
Yeah.
Telly, GNL Telly,
Yeah.
because it's got a little more
Yeah.
of that P90ish.
Don't like the headstock though. Anyways,
Yeah, the headstock is weird.
on the
Let's
offshoot
not
show.
go off
No.
on
Okay, so
I gotta get to bed sometime.
Tony,
tonight.
most importantly,
Yes.
I think we're wrapping this up,
Yes.
and I think is Jared taking this one?
Yes, of course.
Did you give it to Jared?
Are you nuts?
You guys just want to switch, or okay, go ahead.
I'm fine.
They're sharing a mic, everybody. Hepatitis, beware.
He's got to warm up. Hold
Just
on.
kidding.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's come to the time of the show where after Tony and good old Todd,
He got stuck. 'cause-
CC, and Rob all
Yeah.
pack up in an El Camino and come down to my house.
Yeah.
like an old record player.
And it's time for Would You Rather?
Well done.
Nice.
That's been missed.
So you're walking down the street, just like that, and all of a sudden this van comes up and snags you and says, "Listen, you got to play blues tonight for an Eric Clapton."
Is there option to keep walking? Is there?
No,
You see a Strat in your future? Is that what you?
Yes.
the van snatches you up, and you have to do like a Eric Clapton, John Mayall tribute band kind of thing.
Okay, is this what we're reading here?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Sort of.
It's sort of So this Would You Rather was sent by Bruce Bacon. He didn't
Yes.
have a story.
Of course,
he just,
Bruce.
He just had a number one and number two. So I'm just kind of adding.
Yes, well,
stories
it's
to
Marshall
this.
related.
I like Bruce's
of
style,
course.
though.
So you're at the gig and they say, "Hey, look, you can either use amp number one, which is Clapton's open back 212 Bluesbreaker combo amp loaded with KT 66 tubes. It was used on the Beano album that defined the British blues sound. Or are you going to use number two, which is the stock number 39 Marshall Super Tremolo model, 1959T, non-master volume for Appetite. I'm sorry about that. The non-master volume head that was modeled by Tim Coswell at Sir Hollywood and
SIR.
SIR, sorry, and used by Slash on Appetite for Destruction.
It's almost like Chris was clairvoyant here.
Oh yeah.
Would you rather resurrect Clapton or Slash's amp?
That's a tough
Okay.
one.
Well, for some of us. Thank you, Bruce, for sending that one in. That's pretty fantastic.
Seriously, though, take a second here.
What?
Chris made special mention of both of these amps.
I
What
know.
are I mean,
And
seriously,
and
clairvoyant.
Bruce
yeah.
had no idea that we were. Honestly, I didn't even tell him we were doing
Bruce
this.
and Chris, they don't know each other. Do you guys know each other? You don't know. Okay, so what are the? I mean, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, anyways,
Well,
who goes first?
Tony,
Yes.
you always go first.
Jared, is this a gig that you're doing a male tribute?
It is, but there's about 600 people in the crowd.
Only 600. I would never play for only 600 people. Pish tosh.
Volume is not a concern, Tony.
Volume is not a concern. I'm going to go. I mean, I think Slash is a great player, but I mean, in terms of the tone that Clapton got out of his Blues Breaker combo, I think that's the one I would resurrect. I mean, I think that's more along my style of playing anyhow. So I'm going with option number 1, the Clapton Blues Breaker.
Okay, Jared.
This really isn't too hard for me because, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I mean, I'm a Slash fan. I grew up in that era. I know that tone on the record perfectly. Like, if you played it right now, even
You'd
through
know
a
it.
crummy phone, I would still know it. So, in saying that, of course, yeah, definitely go with Slash.
Okay.
By the way, I think SAR is still in business and they still do those mods, right?
I don't know.
I heard
there's
they
some
were.
mystery. There's a little bit of mystery around that mod and that amp.
Yeah, and SIR. At that time, that was before Dave was there. Dave Friedman was there.
But-
I thought Dave Friedman was the one that did that.
On the SIR show, we'll
Yeah,
get to
sorry.
that. Go
Sorry
ahead.
about that.
All right. Let's
Slash.
see.
What's
Go
my
ahead,
name?
Rob.
Can
Reaper of Death.
Can I add a thing that we get to keep the amp that we choose?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. The 1959T,
Okay.
the Slash mod. Just because that fits me, and I think you could roll off your volume knob enough and roll off the tone knob to get into blues, the Blues Breaker kind of territory easier too. So you could still kind of get there,
Sure.
but then crank it up and push it, and it fits me a little more dynamic, a little more raw. Where the Blues Breaker, I mean, it's tempting though, because
All right.
Yeah, I think they're so close. Those are quintessential amps. I'd probably roll with the Blues Breaker just because, like everyone's saying, it sort of fits my style a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously, that's a super hard decision, and I agree with Rob on it being probably close to the Blues Breaker as far as rolling off. I'd probably go with the Blues Breaker head though, the combo.
The combo. Yes. Well,
so you're the tiebreaker, Todd.
I'm going to Blues Breaker for sure.
I thought you'd be going with the Origin.
No. What?
No, that wasn't an option. I'm surprised you go with the. No, why would you go with the Blues Breaker?
Two reasons. One, because I don't rely on the Marshall for my gain sound. That's number one. Number two, I like a big fat combo. I think they're cool.
Amps,
You know,
you have
and
affinity to.
I
Likes the way it looks.
yeah. Well, no, and also, it's. I mean, that's a floored amp, So it's like, got to do that. Yeah.
Yep, I get you.
Yeah, because I like a little bit of sweet in my attack. You know what I mean?
Now to ruin this, go home tonight and Google search original Blues Breaker and original 1959T.
Yeah.
And just wait till if you find
Is it the
original
same
T.
thing?
No.
The original T is like
the price in the T is
Yeah.
in comparison. Yeah, because
Wow.
they made so few of those damn things.
Wow. Well, yes, and Appetite is full of tremolo, so that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we need to thank a few people.
Yes, Todd, because at this point of the show,
We're all about ready to fall over.
we're gonna pass that bottle
Past
over
my
there.
bedtime.
Light one.
Yes. There's a special group of people we love to thank. Todd?
Yes.
Are you listening?
You know I am.
I'm just checking.
Okay.
I thought you might have been dozing off over there.
I'm not.
These are our executive producers. Now, an executive producer makes the show possible. How do you become one? Head over to patreon.com/the Guitar Knobs and check out a couple different levels in which you can participate, become a sponsor, a patron, a hero
Yes.
of the podcast. Each level comes with some very, very nice thank you gifts.
You are the wind beneath our chicken wings.
That's a very bad chicken. What does a chicken sound like?
And Tony, it's getting late. It's like really late right now. Go.
Did I ever tell you you're my hero?
Oh, I'm leaving. Goodbye.
Wrap it up.
But as an executive producer, there's one thing more.
You get to have your name read on the thing.
That's right, Jared. Your name read on the thing, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So special thanks to these executive producers. Moon Guitars, Vader and Pedals, John Halverson, Rick Calhoun, Trevor Gunberg, Elad Mizrahi, Mac D, Richard Kendall, Mark Garton, James White, Justin Jones, Anthony Gemalero, Bill Gola Guitars, John Esterly, Anthony Lathrop, Stefan Lamb, Michael Senchuk, Ken Sayers, Doug Christ, Darren Gregory, Tom Barazin, Rusty Sneeden, Ralph Gottschalk, Don Kloss, Gregory Randall, Brett Hogarth, Eric Hemmer, Stuart George, Michael Furman, James Bell, James Romer, Cameron Pampas, David Tyndall, Trevor Ellenberg, and Christopher Logan. Yes, but wait,
Thank you so very,
there's more, Todd.
Okay.
Because there's a very, very special group of executive producers. We call them our Grand Poobahs. These fine folks have a fez that they wear upon their head whilst listening to the podcast.
And at the same time.
Yes. So special thanks to these Grand Poobahs. Tommy Manesco, Ricardo Iguereda, David Kaminga, Brandon Wound Pickups, Hex Matos, Michio Murakishi, Bob Crouch, Jack Cadian, Sam Jett, Tyler Rhines, LSJ Music Company, John Williams, James Pennington, Adam Johnson, Steve Keys, Cody Foster, Science of Sound, Brian Robison, Jonathan Jerusik, Corey Nigro, Michael Van Zant, Tim Nowak, Jonathan Daly, Martin Cliff, Sean S. David Poe, Billy Spitfire Unlimited, Congregation Gear Demos, Paul Van Eppinger, Scott Sullivan, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups, Matt Hart, and Enrico Fernando.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank you.
so very, very,
Thank
very much. We truly, truly appreciate you, and we could not continue to do this without your help. That is
Absolutely.
that is real talk. We would love it if you have been considering joining that group of illustrious people. Do so. We would love to have you part of our team, so to speak. All right, Tommy, Jerry, Perry.
We gotta
I'm
get
so
Todd to
tired.
bed. Stat. Who's driving
right.
Todd home?
Tony,
Todd?
where can people find you?
I'm probably here in the studio if we're still recording this
Yeah.
thing. No, head over to pickguardian.com. Check out some of the things that I have available for sale on the website. But by and large, what I do is custom work. So shoot me an email. Let me know what you're trying to do, and I will take very good care of you.
Perfect.
Instagram, jared.allen.brandon. Jared Brandon.
Wait.
Message me.
Yeah. Okay. Do that. Let's see, Rob. How about yourself?
Mad Cow Amplification, primarily on Instagram.
Yes.
And you send me an email as well.
Seriously recommend following your Instagram channel.
I've been lazy lately, though. I haven't posted stuff. I've been so...
Well, now you're going to have to. 'cause
When I'm not posting, that means I'm working.
Yes,
so
you
unfortunately-
are always working like a mad dog, but you always have interesting things
Yeah,
to show.
I need to post more.
Okay, Chris.
I would say go to YouTube and search Plexi335. It's like one word, and I got about 10 Marshall demos on there
Oh, perfect.
from back in the day.
Nice. What is it one more time?
Plexi335.
Lexi335.
Do you have a website or anything that has like all your prior musical stuff?
No, but I
You should
have
have one
some
of those.
links to some of the videos that we've done in some of the bands I've been in on my YouTube page
Awesome.
too. So I got a lot of stuff on my YouTube page. You
Okay.
can find
Nice.
some stuff. Appreciate that, Rob.
But we can hear real action demos of the things we've been
Of
talking
the
about.
real
you
things.
can.
All right, fantastic. You can shoot me an email, todd@theguitarknobs.com. You can also DM me on Instagram. I will pass on any messages to the rest of the clowns here. At Guitar Knobs is where you can find us. And please follow us. As many things as we do and as many downloads and everything we have, the numbers should be
Followers.
higher. So let's boost that up. That's the goal. Let's
Boost
do
it.
it. Boost it. All right. Very good, guys. Also, please check out the Valentinos on
yes.
Spotify. We're going to be actually, when this comes out, at the end of this week, no, pretty soon, we got new drops.
Todd doesn't even know what day it is
can't remember.
anymore.
There's new stuff coming out. We have 3 more
What
releases
year is this,
coming out.
Todd?
I am tired. Okay, and I worked a full day. We actually had, we have
I
day
understand.
jobs. So,
Yeah.
anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging in there for hopefully was a entertaining and educational show. I know I learned a whole bunch of stuff. I want to especially thank Chris Connor for swinging by, and I think he's gonna, you're a friend of the show now.
Yeah, man.
So our door's
I enjoyed
open. Anytime you want to roll in here and grab
All
a
right,
seat, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, Jared, thank you so much for coming in and
Good to
surprising
see
me.
you, Jared.
Hello, everybody.
Yes,
Love
we
you,
miss
Jared.
you terribly. Rob, go kick rocks. All right, everybody, have a fantastic guitar week and subscribe.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm fried.
So tell John not to wake me up until 8 a.m. I'm going to be asleep in the record.
What's wrong with them?
Glad to be back.
Tony's stuck.
No, somebody.
Yes, I'm almost 100% sure it is,
Sweet.
which means I'm probably wrong. But
Yep,
anyways,
yep,
like I said, I got to read it. I got to,
What's going on?
yeah, just
You gotta
listen.
feel
and
it.
Yeah.
flap his
That
gums.
gives
So
you a pretty good
I get a
idea.
sense of how you guys started out. Yeah.
And then Todd talks
Sounds
for
good.
the next
Check
30
one, too.
minutes.
Uh-huh. You're not wrong.
It's a really
You're not
it's
wrong.
a good formula.
All right.
Let's go.
All right, let's do stuff.
All right. I don't have anything.
Do we have
I
a
looked around
giant
the
rubber
room for
band?
something about that
Reach your
size.
left hand out. I'll be or grab the.
He's going to grab him. He's going to
Jared, what the hell are you doing here?
I love you.
smack
Yeah.
me.
Get one of those fur blankets and put it behind you. That way you
It'll be
won't hurt
fine.
so bad.
It'll be
Yeah.
fucking dark in here.
It's
I
not
don't care
that
what you
dark.
Oh my God!
You're sitting above. You're sitting below all.
You've got the
lights.
V.
Look at. You have the most lights.
say. I just thought that'd be cool.
That was great. They were just parts casters.
I think so, yeah.
And then Kramer's like, wait a minute.
Right. Right.
Hey, they were put.
We're gonna make you a guitar, son.
Just say what were the.
And away we go. Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.